Okay, so if you have been following the tutorial, you'll now have what you see in front of you, which is 8 of these curly long leaves. You're going to have 7 of the calyx leaves, 3 with the curve going one way and 4 with the curve going the other way. And you're going to have 7 of your main skirt petals. What you see in front of you now basically makes the whole BlueBelle. We've got to do a little bodice shape, but we do that in situ on the mannequin, and I'm going to be running through that as we build the mannequin. So what you're going to need next is the strip of blue felt, which is included in the kit, and you're going to need some sort of ball-headed pins. There are some in the kit, which I've got here, but these are your finishing and final sort of decorative pins. You can use them by all means, but you're just going to want some general pins for sort of pinning and placement purposes. So I'm going to clear this away. We're going to grab our mannequin and we're going to start assembling the BlueBelle. To begin, grab a little tuft of your cornflower blue. The felt strip that we're going to use doesn't match the colour, so in order for this bright blue not to show through, we're just going to cover it with a little bit of this. And this is commercial produced felt, so it's good and strong. All I want you to do is you're going to stab through it, so just a little bit of a stab and a lift, and just cover your felt strip with the cornflower blue colour. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect because our petals are going to be sitting over the top of it, which will also further disguise the piece of felt. But we just don't want any huge blocks of colour coming through. Edges don't need to be particularly neat. Just work your way down. And again, when we've finished this, although I won't do this on camera, when you finish covering this, just pop it under the iron. Get those fibres laying nice and flat. So just a bit of a tuft all the way down. And then when you iron it, we'll just trim up the edges. I said most of this is going to be hidden anyway, but this extra little step just ensures that you're not going to see this random bit of bright blue. Almost done. Nice little tuft on the end, and we're done. Don't make this too thick. You know, this has to be nice and thin. This is going to be going around the waistband, so we don't want, you know, we don't want a thick band of felt. Otherwise, that's going to affect the sort of the silhouette. There, that's good enough. just a light covering. If you've got any really bright blocks of blue just showing through, just pop a few fibres over it, just dull it down. Now I'm going to pop this under the iron, and then I'm just going to trim along the edge so that we've just got a good sort of fluffy surface there. So there we go. I've popped it under the iron. I've trimmed it up. As you can see, it's really rough, but it just dulls that colour. We are unlikely to see any of this, but sod's law will say that the one bit that we don't cover will be the bit that ends up showing up. So just having that little bit of colour to match in with our petals can't hurt. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next step. Okay, this is going to be a little bit challenging to film this because I haven't had to sort of film something which was more vertical. Usually it's quite flat, so we're going to do our best, but I do apologise up front if this starts going a bit awry. You will have covered your waistband with a touch of that cornflower blue, just so it blends to the petals. And I've got my little pot of random pins, ball-headed pins. And it's probably worth mentioning that I've got this on a Lazy Susan, quite a rickety one, so I apologise for the noise. But if you've got a turntable of cake decorating or a Lazy Susan or anything like that, then it's worth popping your mannequin on there. It just lets you turn it round nice and smoothly. So take your blue band of felt, grab a pin and find the centre of your waistband. Pop a pin in. These pins are quilting pins, so they're actually huge. And then pop that in the middle of your mannequin. So you've got a centre point marked. Then turn it round and bring it round to the back. It's going to cross over, but you just want to see where you're at. You will have stuffed yours ever so slightly differently, so this is all very customised to your mannequin. So I'm just going to turn it back round. This part begins the endless fiddling. The commercial felt will stretch, so what I want you to do is just pull it out. This will elongate it. Oop. But we're going to be pulling this quite tightly, so you don't want that to happen once the petals are on. So get the sort of stretch out of it now. Right, let's fold that back over. Let me find a slightly shorter pin for that. Mark your centre. And then centre front of the mannequin. Okay, bring it round to the back. And you're going to pull this as tight as you can. And you can just pop another pin in, just for now. So, on the back, you want it to overlap ever so slightly, but not a lot. Enough to get a couple of pins through and hold it in place. So we don't need all of this. Grab a pair of scissors. And snip it off just past the centre on that side. and then bring this one round and snip it off just past the centre on that side. Pull it back round nice and tight and pop your holding pin in. So we've fixed our waistband in place. So now it's time for the petals, and you will have noticed that I've left this sort of bit of pipe cleaner sticking out the top, and there's a very good reason for that. When we're going to attach the petals, we will cut the wire off so that it doesn't protrude the waistband, but having this little wire here does mean that you can get a really good angle on the petal coming away from the waistband. I've tried several wire combinations in the petals, and if you just loop it up round here, it's floppy. It doesn't do what you want it to do. So having this little bit of wire at the top is going to mean that you can get that sort of beautiful angle off of the mannequin to create that drop. All of this will be covered with felt. So grab your pile of petals and pick what you feel is the best one, and there is obviously always one that you like the look of most of all. So I'm going to pick this one, and this one is going to go front and center, right in the middle, right at the front. So I'm going to pull out my center pin, and I'm going to line up this petal. You want the top of the petal to overlap the waistband a little bit. Probably, I'd say maybe put it halfway up the waistband, and then pop your pin back in. Obviously, when you're pinning through, you've got a dowel in the middle there, so you might have to put your pins in on interesting angles. So that's our first petal placed. Okay, I think what I'm going to do is move that petal up so that the top is actually a little more up near the top of the waistband. And for now, we're just going to stick in a single pin, so we can just get that placement. So we will stick in a single pin if I can manage to dodge the wire. There we go. Right. So take your next two petals, and they're going to go on here like this. The way that I lay out the petals is the first center one goes behind, and then these two will come over like this. The important thing here is just to get that even spacing, and that's why we're just sort of temporarily pinning them in place. Like so. Don't worry about the bottoms too much at the moment, but you kind of want them to be the same level. If you want to do any adjustment, if you do have one that's slightly longer, take it up or down in the waistband, because this is a bit more flexible up here. So I like that, and then these are all going to sort of come out from there. Okay, then we're going to get the next two, and I now take these behind, so a little bit of overlap. You want your overlap to be about the same. There, and go to the other side. And this one is going to go here. And then finally the two at the back. And you kind of want to make sure that one is connected to this bit and the other is connected to that bit, that you don't go through both layers of this waistband. So just move that and pin over slightly. And again, I'm going underneath the previous petal. And then this one goes underneath the previous petal on the other side, and then you just get this little bit of overlap at the back. There. So that's, looks a little odd, but that's about where we want to be. Now go round and just make sure that you don't have any that are way more overlapped. See, I don't have very much overlap just there, maybe a little much here, so I'm going to very slightly move that one. Like so. I'll go to the other side. That looks pretty even. I've got a modest overlap at the centre back. Now my recommendation now is to go away, have a cup of tea and come back to it and just have another look. It's really important that you get this just how you like it. I'm quite happy with this, but any excuse for a cup of tea. And when we come back, what we're going to do is make any final little tweaks to placement of the petals, and then take the whole thing off so that we can felt these petals onto the waistband and make them secure. Now comes the fun part of getting this off of the mannequin but keeping the petals in the same place, and you will find the way that works best for you. There are these wonder clips which I have found to be really useful. You may or may not have these, and you can just clip your petal in place. The other method that I have used is to take a pin and pin it acrossways, which is slightly fiddlier, greater risk of stabbing oneself with a pin, but it will hold that petal nicely on that waistband. If you just take this waistband off, these single pins will start sliding out and it will be a nightmare. So taking that, in fact I'm going to take this off of the Lazy Susan momentarily because I don't want it turning. There we go. So first one, and as you are taking them off or repinning them, just be mindful of the angle. You don't want to pin it over there. You want to make sure that it stays flat. It hasn't got to be a firm pin. It's just got to be enough to hold it. So, nearly that. This is generally where I find that I've pinned it back to the mannequin again. How are we doing? Oh no, we're nearly there. Okay, that last one can just come off. So there we have our skirt. I hope. And our petals, there we go, which look very odd in place now, but what we're going to do is get our felting surface and felt these just at the top so that when we bring the mannequin back in we can lay this round. This one's being a little unruly. Hang on. I'll sort that out, but there. So I'm going to grab my felting mat and we're going to felt these in position. So I've grabbed my felting surface and we're just going to attach the band to all of these petals. So a couple of things to be aware of is that this has been, obviously these have been attached on a curve. So when you've laid it flat, there's going to be this kind of bunching and ruffling. So we're going to work in small increments and just felt one petal at a time in the right place. Now if you've got a rice bag felting surface, then I would recommend using that rather than a flat piece of foam, because you can use the curve of the bag to help lay these down. I do have one somewhere, but I'm going to work on the foam. There are lots of pins and lots of wires, so this isn't a felting exercise. This is just an attaching exercise. Grab your needle, find a spot that it goes through, and just needle felt around a little bit. That's better. You are driving the top part of this petal through into the band. It is fair to say that you could probably just glue all of these on. use super glue, but I'm going to show you this method. Super glue is very permanent. At least with this you'll get a degree of, if one is really, really wrong, you can always just pull it off and reattach it. So for those who are newer to felting, you may want to just attach these very lightly, pull the pins out, reattach it to the mannequin, see how it's all hanging, get it back off, and then do your sort of final attach of felting. But I'm happy with this one, so that's my first pin out. So then we'll go to the next one. And again, just make sure that the part of the felt for that petal is laid flat. It doesn't matter what's going on over here, but this part. We're going to add a little bit more felt over this as well. But I just want to get this held in place so I can take these pins out. And don't forget to lift. That's good for the second one. And obviously you can felt across where they overlap, but you don't want to felt across where they overlap down too far. Just stick to the width of that waistband. And that should be that one. Now what I'm going to do is, this is my centre petal, so I'm just going to go to the other side and felt back the other way. And obviously you can use this technique, any kind of thing, leaves. We've got the Gatsby Glitz feather flapper dress mannequin, which is great fun to make. It looks beautiful, so do check that one out as well. Right, next one. As always, I'm trying to do this as quickly as possible. You can spend as much time as you need. Okay, nearly there. I do like to, I realise that sometimes the repetitive thing can be a little monotonous, but I do like to show the whole process, unless it's obviously completely irrelevant that you need to see it all. Mainly because throughout the process of doing something like this, something could go wrong, and it gives me an opportunity to show, you know, how I would try and fix something. But I hope it doesn't go wrong. Right, we're on to the last one in the middle. So I'm just going to pull that pin back, make sure that my felt here is nice and flat. I'm going off camera, I think, but make sure that sort of The bit here is nice and flat. There, I think we've got it. And you can see I've got a bit of pipe cleaner coming through here. That's not a problem. We're going to lay down some more fibres anyway. But that is kind of where you want to be. And you can see I've got my centre one behind, my two over top of that, and then these are all behind as they go round to the back. So let's pop this back on the mannequin and see how it looks. Okay, so let's see if I can get this in shot. So there's our waistband, there's our middle one. So what I'm going to do is pop just a holding pin in the centre and pull it round so that it overlaps again. Let's just pop another holding pin so we can see where we're at. That's looking fairly decent. I think that needs to move up a little bit. So there you have the skirt in situ. It's wandering over that way, but I don't have it on the Lazy Susan at the moment, but there. So now what I'm going to do is take it back off, lay it back down on the felting surface again, and we're going to lay down some extra fibres to sort of seal all of this in, give us a real good sort of position. So we're back to our surface. Got a little bit more of the cornflower blue. You've got a couple of options with these pipe cleaners. I would just snip them down if they are particularly long. You want to snip them down just a bit and then bend them. If you bend them around the waistband, it's going to make this whole thing thicker. So I tend to bend them, let's see if I can get this, I tend to bend them that way. So they're like that. You can just snip them off. It's not going to make that much difference, and for expediency that's what I'm going to do for these. I'm just going to take them all off at the top of the waistband line. There's always options, always different ways of doing things. This was the one that was centre right, and I was thinking that that was a little low, so oh no, I'm just going to pull it off and I'm going to reattach it up ever so slightly. There. We'll carry on just taking the tops off of these pipe cleaners. There. Okay. So with that now done, we're going to lay down some felt or some fluff over the felt waistband. And you don't want this to be very thick. We're just going to put a little bit down this way. And we're sort of covering the top part of the petal. Driving these fibres right the way through and out the other side. And you're just going to work down that's what these fibres are for. They're for driving right the way through. Don't want much of them, but there you can see. Then I would turn over and put a pinch, just a pinch of those fibres on the back. And just very lightly drive some the other way. Obviously, you don't want to be driving, there's the end of the waistband, you don't want to be driving fibres through down here, otherwise you're going to make your petals messy. And then go back to the front and drive back the other way. And this is really going to hold this in place. You can use glue. You could probably stitch it if you wanted to, but just keep it all up in this top section, because what will happen is these individual petals will come up and sort of blend out into this waistband. You could have maybe wrap the tips in some, or these little ends of the pipe cleaners in a little wool before putting them down. Maybe there are so many different ways of getting to the end result. I am a fan of saying that there is no wrong way. There's just your way and the way that works for you. So there we go. And you're going to work down the whole thing. Just covering up those pipe cleaners. I said they are important to the construction, but this is going to be underneath the lower part of the bodice, so there's going to be something else covering it as well, and that's also why we don't want to make it too thick, because everything that we add here you know, bulks out that waistline. So I am just going over this as quickly as I can, but we do want that nice and solid. I'm going to turn it over. Just drive back the other way as well. I said not too much on the driving back, but it's it's all going to help. Just really make sure you catch the very tops of those petals through that waistband. Okay, we are getting there. Okay, last one. There we go. We're going to start work on the bodice part, and this really is sort of a freehand type of thing. This is the moss colour, which is included in the kit, and I have pulled out and weighed off. This is about 2 grams. The first thing that we're going to do with this is create a sort of square / rectangle, which is going to cover this part here, so down to the bottom of the waistline and up to the highest point that you want your sort of V neckline. So I'm going to do it to about here. And there are no hard and fast rules at this point. We're pretty much winging it. So I'm going to put this top edge up where I want the top of my bust line to be. I'm going to put that down there, and then you want it to come round the sides a little bit, sort of middle of the armpit, if she had arms. So, and just look, same on the other side. Yep, it's about right. So when you've got your 2 grams roughly laid out, and mine has worked out in very, very rough terms, about 11 centimeters across that way and about 8 centimeters that way. So we've got 11 and 8, and those are on my approximate measurements. So now what I'm going to do is we're going to get the felting surface. I'm going to felt this sort of rectangle. So here's our rectangle, and we're just going to start felting it flat. So I'm just working over the whole surface. Just don't forget to keep lifting. And these sort of fluffy edges, just turn back ever so slightly. So we get just a little bit more of a straight edge. Turn it over, do the same on the other side. you can be a lot more creative in your designs with, you know, your shapes and styles, but this hopefully will give you sort of a starting point, a technique to use. So I'm just going to pull that out just a little bit. Fold that edge. This is going to be the inside, so I'm going to work with it sort of right side facing down. There we go. So as you can see, I've got some straighter edges. Don't felt them too hard or too firm at the moment, because there's still some additional bits that we've got to put on this. Then we want to create a straighter sort of bottom part, so this is where it's going to meet the waistline. So I'm going to turn it back over and just turn that up. Felt it in place a little bit. Then roll it back. And feel free to, you know, if you've got some core wool, you know, try this process out with your core wool, you know, or some little multicolored little bits that you've got left over. Just jam them all together, and try this out. You know, try it out with some scrap first. So if you can see now, we've got a nice bottom edge and we've got two sort of straight sides, and this bit's a bit tufty up here, but that's okay. Just going to felt this down a little bit more. Come in with a multi-tool. Yeah, however you want to do it. And it's not a hard felt right now. You can see there's still a lot of stretch and looseness about this. We're just getting a basic shape like that. Now what we're going to do is just pop it back on our mannequin and put a couple of pins in and adjust it. Okay, back with our mannequin. So we've got this bottom edge, that's going on the waistline. We want to make sure that got some thin spots, but I'm going to sort that out in a minute. This is just getting that basic shape, and as you can see, I've got quite a lump of felt here, so I'm just going to loosen that up a little bit. Then grab yourself a couple of pins, and what we're going to do is just pin it on the side there, turn it round, and pin it on the other side there. And then we're going to pin it at the points where we want this bust sort of V-neck to be. So I want it there, and I want it there. So that's, looks horrendous, I know, but bear with me. So what we're going to do now is, this bit over here is way too much, if you can see. this kind of follows the line down this side quite well, but on this side it's all not going very well, so means my bit's a bit big, and that's fine. I am just going to grab my scissors. Oh no! And I'm just going to cut it off down there so it's a little more symmetrical. That's all that we want right now, is just this kind of, it reaches round to here, round to here, and it goes up to the points that we want our V-neck, sort of the top of the bodice to be. Now what we're going to do is we're going to bring this around to the back, and we're going to bring this around to the back, so it creates a nice sort of back piece. It doesn't just look like this is hanging in midair. So for that, we're going to need another piece that is big enough to go from here round to the back. That's not, don't worry if your piece isn't big enough, you can always add on a bit more. That's the wonderful thing about this felting, is that you can add on more. All of this is going to be done very, very loosely at the moment, so we've got lots of prospect for change. So I'm going to put that there. So I'm going to need another piece. I'm going to weigh this. Let's see. This bit is 0.8 of a gram. So I'm going to weigh out about the same amount, 0.8. So now I've got two pieces that are 0.8. So I'm going to take this off of the mannequin, we're going to get it back to our surface, and then we're going to attach these bits on the side and sort of felt them down so we've got a really rough shape. So here are our three pieces. We've got our piece we had at the side, at the front, and the two bits we've just done for the sides. I'm going to overlap that there, and this sort of frizzy end will just blend out. If you fold and then try and stab down, you'll end up with a very distinctive line. So all over that join. Actually don't want that quite so high, just bring it down ever so slightly. And then go over this side piece as well. And what we're doing here is just creating that sort of tab to go around the back of the mannequin and make it look like a, you know, an item of clothing, a top. So there's that tab on that side. Just move the whole thing over. Do exactly the same on this side. And you want, yeah, you want these pieces to be even. I'll measure mine momentarily. Go go all over, just getting them flattened down. Just remember to lift. I've got a thin spot right here I can see. So I'm just going to pull a bit of those fibres over. And this does mean that you can create sort of shapes for clothing and all manner of interesting you know, bits to do. If this were thicker, this is just to cover the mannequin because we've got the swirly things to go on the front. But if you were actually making this as, you know, the real sort of forefront, you could stitch beads onto it. You'd need something a bit thicker and a bit more firmly felted. Like I said, this is merely a cover up, so it doesn't. See, I've got this lump back here where I folded that back, so I'm going to pull it out and I'm just going to cut some of that out. So that's just making it far too bulky. So now I've got much flatter. Felt is very forgiving. And the nice thing about it is you can decide, oh, you know, I want a bit more to sort of come up this way, and you can just felt it on, hold it up to your mannequin, see if you like it. So that's the kind of oddest shape ever, but that's all we want right now. It's still very, very loose, so you don't want to be pulling at it too hard. We're going to put it back on the mannequin, refine the shape a little more, see where we're at. And there you can now see it's starting to take shape as an actual top. So this is going to come around the back, it's going to overlap, and we're going to put 3 pins in here, the green pearl headed pins that come with the kit. And having it 3 pins will mean that it will look like buttons, but it's helping to hold it in place. There is a piece of green fabric for those of you who want to use it. This can be felted like we did with the skirt. You could felt onto the back if you wanted something that was a bit more rigid. That's in there because that's entirely optional for you. So that's going to go there, and then come round the back. Our bit that goes up here is looking pretty good. So I'm going to pop some pins back in. There we go. Oops. And this is just on and off the mannequin. See, that needs a little bit more felting. Take your time with it, there's no rush. So that's the start of our little bodice shape. So I'm going to take this off now. These I think are maybe too wide, so I want to bring this sort of down a little bit. So back onto the felting surface and a little more refinement. So here we go again, just back in. Now I want these side pieces to be smaller, a little bit thinner, so you can just cut it down. And I'm going to take this bottom a little bit leveler. It doesn't have to be perfect, it really doesn't. So I'm going to take that down. Hold it up, have a look. I think that's a bit better. I'm going to go all over this and just felt it down a little bit firmer. Just get those fibres knitted together. And all we're doing here is just making sure that we've got a nice even sort of spread of fibres. We haven't got any thick places and we don't have any thin spots. Just got a good coverage of felt. And you can use this technique to create any kind of shape of bodice that you want. You know, just start with a basic shape, add on bits where you want it to go. So I am, yep, that's all quite nice. Now we're going to turn our attention to this sort of top neckline, or lack thereof. And what I'm going to do now is pop it back onto the mannequin again, and we're going to work out exactly where we want this neckline to be. Here she is again. It's probably worth pointing out that you don't want to use it as a, unless you're going to use it as a pincushion, you don't want to use it as a pincushion because this will leave holes where your fabric is showing and supposed to be lovely and beautiful. I have a bad habit of using these as pincushions. So I'm just going to put this approximately in place again. Pin in the back just to hold that round. Our focus at the moment is this neckline. Now my frizzy bit's up here. So there's the bust there. And what I want it to do is come up like that. And the same on the other side. Now put your pins in the same place equally. Now the neckline, I actually want to come down a little bit further. So what I'm going to do is just snip that centre ever so slightly, and then see if I can do this in some light. It'll fold back. Do you see how we're getting that V? So if you wanted it, you know, down lower, then just snip and turn back, and you can create the shape of bust line that you want. If you snip too low, then when you put it back on your surface, just frizz out these little bits over each other and you can felt them back over. So that's a little bit low for me. I'm just going to pull it around until you're happy with it. And I'm quite happy with that. It's coming round to the side, round to the back. So that's the sort of the bodice shape. So it's back onto the felting surface, felt all of this in more defined shapes, and then we're going to iron it. So it's back onto the surface. Here are my top bits. So what I want to do is just use the surface and just almost sort of felt this very lightly to the surface. So it's holding my shape. This is gonna draw like so. And turn these where we've snipped, just turn them back, tuck them under. And that's going to help you create a nice sort of crisp edge. You can do all kinds of different necklines. There we go, see? There. And all the sort of the swirlies that are going to go on the front will I'm going to bring that over the back. So all of the swirlies and stuff that are going to go on the front are going to cover this. So this is more of a modesty panel. The shape isn't crucial. There we go, and I'm just going to lightly around the edges. So now you can see we've got this. Hold it up to the light. Make sure you've got no real thin spots, and I've got one here. So if you're going to add fluff to this, then you want the edges to be quite frizzy. That way it will blend out into your piece. So I'm just going to scrape the tip of my needle over and just frizz that all out, and then go over it again. Hold it back up to the light, check again, and do this as much as your project needs. I mean, this is quite the epic project. It's very elaborate, but the results that you can get, I think, make it worth it. So that one's a lot nicer. I'm just going to check the other side. It's a little bit thin too. Okay, I think I'm good with that. So now what I'm going to do is get the iron out. And I mean, you've seen the various things that I've ironed, so I'm not going to set up the camera and everything. I'm just going to go off camera and iron this. So cotton setting, again, good bit of steam. And when you're ironing this, you want pressure and just a little bit of a jiggle of a movement. If you run the iron across it like this, you're going to start warping the fabric because this is quite thin and quite flimsy. So pressure and a wiggle, not a back and forth too much. We're done with the ironing, and here is the bodice now, you can see it really does look like a piece of fabric. It's not symmetrical up at the top, but that's okay at the moment. You can, in fact we'll do that now, if you fold it on that center point like this, you can see any bits that are slightly misshapen. And if you want to just go in and cut it, we're going to trim round the edges anyway, but you can take this opportunity just to trim it round, and then it will look the same on, exactly the same on both sides. Check your tabs round to the back. We're still leaving this frizzy at the moment, but we're going to cut that. We're going to cut this down so that it overlaps real nicely at the back. And then I'm just going to take off the really unruly hairs on this. I'm not creating a real sharp crisp line at the bottom, because that sort of wavy or that uneven edge will actually blend between the blue and the green a little bit better. It's not a hard line. So let's get this back in. As you can see now, it looks a little more like an actual top. So I'm just going to bring this round, pop in a pin or two just to hold it at the back for a second. Back to the front. I'm just going to pin these up sort of in situ. So there we have it. From that wonderful mess that we started with to something that's starting to look very refined and very polished. Now comes the sort of fun part. We can pull this off and pop our skirt on and lay this over the top, and this will give us our first real glimpse at where this is going. So there's my centre skirt petal. Bring it round to the back. Get that pull, that tension on it. Really need that nice and tight. I'm just going to put a couple of pins in there for a second. So there's our skirt. And then we're just going to overlay that bodice. Bring it round to the back. A couple more pins. And we will refine this back part later. But for now we want as much flexibility. So there we go. This will fit better once we start sort of putting the swirls and stuff on the front, but just as an initial glimpse at what we're doing, that's not looking too bad. Okay, so we're going to add on the calyx leaves and the sort of swirls and curls and things